Welcome to The Game Plan, where we're diving into real conversations about prevention, purpose, and the power to change lives. Here's your host, Meg Bulger.
Welcome to The Game Plan. I'm Meg Bulger, and today I am honored to be joined by General Barrye L, Ph.D. He has spent his life leading, serving, and fighting for stronger communities. From his distinguished military career to his work as CEO of CADCA, the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, General Price has been one of the nation's leading voices in prevention and youth empowerment. General Price has been a strong believer in GameChanger's mission from the beginning. And now, through a new partnership between CADCA and GameChanger, that impact is expanding even further. Today, we are honored to welcome General Price to The Game Plan to talk about prevention, student leadership, community action, and why he believes GameChanger has become one of the country's most impactful youth prevention movements. Well, General Price, you have spent years working in prevention and community leadership through CADCA. What first drew you to this kind of work?
Meg, thanks for inviting me on The Game Plan. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you. So college, 1984, my last semester at the University of Houston, my college roommate was exposed to crack cocaine by his girlfriend. All I knew was what First Lady Nancy Reagan had armed me with, which was just say no. I tried that. It didn't seem to work. It was an encounter with my roommate, and then I thought he was okay until I came back to Houston in March of 1986 to get married, and I realized that he was still suffering from that. Fast forward 30 years later, he's still heavily involved in drug addiction, and he dies just 3 days before his 53rd birthday. And I felt a sense of tremendous guilt because all I could say to him is, just say no. You're better than that. I didn't seek counsel of his parents. I didn't tell his family. I just thought he could just overcome it. And the failing really is that this was not what I envisioned I would do after 31 years in the military. But Carl's death, Carl David Holmes was his name. His death really caused me to say, let me see, I couldn't help Carl, but let me see if I can do something that might help scores of others. And so that drew me to CADCA.
Wow. And I'm so sorry to hear that. But as a young kid going through that, did you feel almost, I don't have the tools, I'm not equipped to speak to him on this or speak to his family?
Well, I had never seen addiction. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know. I thought it was a moral failing, as most people did at that point, and was just wondering why Carl is a 3.8 electrical engineering student, how he could get involved in this, and then how so quickly he became addicted to it. And as I'd see him through the years, he would say things like, well, if I can just not have money, then I can kick it. I'm like, Carl, you can't live without money. And so it was calling him. It had grabbed a hold of him. And when they found him 30 years later, 3 days before his 53rd birthday, he was under a bridge in Louisville, Kentucky, systems shutting down. And I said, I need to get involved in this after I retire. And so I call it continued service, but it's really a moral calling for me to help other people's kids.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I know that you are a big advocate, as well as CADCA, on prevention.
Yes.
Before it starts. And that's a huge theme.
Yes.
What GameChanger is all about is prevention and getting before the addiction.
Yes.
Why do you think that is such a good fit?
So we know now, based on science, that when the brain is fully formed by age 25, the likelihood of addiction decreases significantly. And Carl, in this case, was 20 when he first became exposed to it, or 21. And so now it's like, if you can stop it, if you can arm and equip kids to to not just say no, but to be about no, that they don't have a choice, that the risk is very high that they'll become addicted. That's really the sweet spot where we wanna hit them.
What makes the Game Changer approach unique or effective in your mind?
I think Game Changers is unique on so many different levels. First, let me say that it usually takes a lot to impress me. And I was invited by a county commissioner from Mercer County, Greg Puckett, several years ago to a Game Changers event, and I met Larry Puccio and Annette Joe Bozek, and Ryan Leaf was the MC, and Nick Saban was there. What's the singer's name? Country singer. Brad Paisley sang an original song, and I was just blown away by all these stalwarts. In fact, this is a funny story. Major Harris, UVA alum and stalwart football player. When I arrived in Germany, University of West Virginia football games would play in Germany, of all places. Why is that? But my soldiers were pretending to be Major Harris, whoever played the quarterback. And I'm like, who the hell is Major Harris? And I started watching the games. And so I met Major Harris at the Game Changers event. But it was just amazing to see how this organization called Game Changers were calling back all these native sons and daughters of West Virginia. And they were answering the call to come back and be a part of it. I'm getting emotional. They answered the call. I couldn't believe it. I mean, these people were world-renowned people who had come back and were answering the call from this organization. And I was like, is this real? And then the more that I got to know Larry and Joe, and the more that I started engaging with them and seeing the great work that they were doing on the ground, it truly is game-changing. In fact, I'm talking to Joe and asking him, can you take this nationally? Because other states need to do the same thing. It's phenomenal. It's a game changer. So that's my love and appreciation of the organization.
And if anybody understands about answering a higher call, it is you. So that is high praise for Game Changer after your
I'm sorry, I can't believe it.
No, it's real. And I mean, that's just honest. I can see it in your eyes. That's completely real. And that's, I think what makes Game Changer special as well. And you've been across the state speaking at pep rallies with students and interacting with them in West Virginia. And what strikes you?
I've gotten to see what the problem is. And, in West Virginia for a long time was kind of ground zero for the peel mills, ground zero for kids who are fostered now because their parents are either incarcerated or dead, ground zero for grandparents raising kids now, skipping that generation because the parents were absent. And so to see an organization and to see all of these people who had made it, and to see them come back and to say, I want to be a part of the solution. Wow.
Yeah. It
was amazing. And so every time Joe calls, Joe has me on speed dial, I take the call. Right. And one of the things if I could say that I'm proudest of is now CADCA and Game Changers and Game Changers University are in partnership. And I'm pleased to announce, and I'll announce it tonight, that Game Changers has been selected for CADCA's highest award, the humanitarian award, based on the great work that they're doing in the state of West Virginia.
I mean, it's an honor beyond belief. And, and I work with Game Changer throughout the years, so I understand. And, it's to come back and you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
How could you hear about this and not want to be involved?
And there's nothing like it. And it gets bigger and bigger. And I'm like, okay, can we start the same snowballing in other places? And then this new concept with GameChangers U. I've seen the videos. I've actually been able to play with the model. My son played with it yesterday, and it's really game changing. Yeah,
That's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it's important for students in West Virginia to hear these kind of conversations from, you mentioned Major Harris, Brad Paisley coming to Nick Saban, all these West Virginians or that just played at West Virginia, yourself included, that comes back? And why do you think it's important for them to hear it from these athletes and mentors rather than just not law enforcement or teachers?
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned in my leadership journey is that everybody starts someplace. And it's easy for young people to believe that I am who I am now, that I've always been that, and that's been my trajectory.
Right.
And one of the things that when they see these people as not as icons, not as superstars, these unreachable people, when they see them as real people, I think they realize that their lives are not that different. Their circumstances were not that different. One of the concepts that I love that's uniquely American is this concept of social Darwinism, that pulling yourself up by your bootstrap, that we can rise above our circumstances and become whoever we endeavor to become through hard work. That's what GameChangers shows them, and that's what this celebrity golf tournament, and this conference does, is that it exposes people to people, and they come back as just West Virginians. Oh, by the way, I saw Brad Paisley last year. He's he's the only person that every time he sings the national anthem, in the World Series, the game goes to extra innings. And it was the first time yeah. But last year he sang in the World Series, and he had his hat off. First time I've seen him without having a head full of luscious hair, and I thought he was bald under that hat. That was amazing to see it, though.
That's awesome. So you touched on this and the fabulous award that GameChanger is receiving from CADCA. And they're partnering with GameChanger now, as you mentioned. From your perspective, what was it about GameChanger that when you presented this to CADCA, and you're the CEO, but when you said, this is moving mountains here, this is what we need to take a look at and award them, what was it about?
So one, I had to make the case to my board of directors, to my coalition advisory council, and then to my staff, and then they all vote, and it was unanimous.
Wow.
It's hard to artfully and aptly convey to somebody what GameChangers is, because it's like a unicorn, right? It doesn't exist any other place. There's nothing like it. And when I talk about, what they do in this celebrity golf tournament, and they think I'm dropping names, when I see Jennifer Gardner, Ryan Saban, and Tim Tebow was there last year, and, and Brad Paisley, and it's like, this isn't real. And I said, no, I've seen it. I've been there. I've been in audience with them. I said, we got Ryan Leaf from them. He was the MC for the first year that I came. And I said, it's real. This is what they're doing. They got a website. Here, look at it. And then I started showing them. And then I showed them clips from GameChangers U. The videos Joe had sent me. Now, Joe didn't know that, nor Larry, that they were being considered for this award. But I've been talking to Joe about this curriculum that they've developed for GameChangers U. I've been talking to him for months. I've seen the lesson plans. I'm like, this is what this award was created for an organization like this. And so, and usually it's an external process that I'm very little involved, but I said, this is the organization for this year. I felt that and presented it, made the case, and I choked up, talking about the organization with them as well. And they were like, wow, he's really believing this organization. And I really want to see it taking the scale because it's such a brilliant idea. I'm from Gary, Indiana, and God, there's scores of people who came from Gary, but that's just a city. But imagine the whole state of Indiana. People came back and applied their resources and brought their networks and brought their celebrity, brought their status, back to the state. I think it's just such a brilliant idea that everybody should do it.
Do you think that obviously West Virginia, it's a big state, but it's tight-knit community. Do you think that's why they've been able to be so effective in the schools, or do you think it's the people? They're just everyone rallying around?
I think it's the people, because if you think about West Virginia, it's mostly rural. I mean, and so one town is not necessarily connected to another town.
Right.
But this works. And I don't know what's the special sauce that makes it work here, but I think it could certainly work in other places, because I think most other places are more connected. I don't know how many cities and counties are in West Virginia, but I've traveled all over the state, and I think it's the most beautiful state in the country. So
it is, especially with drive to Briar. It's pretty incredible.
It is.
If you could, just talk about the hope that you have for GameChanger and where they could take this. I mean, in just a few short years, what they've been able to do and accomplish. And you talk about a lot of other names, but we have you sitting here supporting it, emotional, advocating for it.
Sure.
Where do you see the long-term effects?
One, I hope that everybody in the state will buy into this notion of being a game changer, because that then makes them a champion. I've when I first arrived, they started with the video. This was about 3-4 years ago, with all of these people saying their name, and I am a game changer. And I just thought, that's the buy-in that everybody needs. And that's really the buy-in that our kids need from adults, to say, I'm about changing your circumstances, changing your trajectory, and I'm going to bring my resources, my network to bear to help to change your circumstances. And boy, all over the state, in Philippi with Pastor Rustin Siemens, he has a youth empowerment program where they're building tiny houses for foster youth. Amy Haskins, who sits on our Coalition Advisory Committee, she's from West Virginia. She's a social worker. Greg Puckett from Mercer County, who's all in. He's a Mercer County commissioner, runs a coalition. Greg was on our Coalition Advisory Council. Greg was on our board. Greg was an officer on the CADCA board. And so I have tremendous ties and tentacles. And I used to command an organization that had a station in Beckley when I was, and that's how I met Governor Manchin, Hurricane 2006. I met him at the airport in Beckley. And so I've just been always fascinated by the state, and I want to do some whitewater rafting. I hear that's kind of my I don't want to do base jumping, but I want to do some whitewater.
No, I wouldn't either, but I heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, they tell me, I don't know.
No, thank you. That's not for me. You mentioned how just saying I am a game changer and the prevention aspect and everything that they're doing. What a difference does it make to have a positive message like that than, like you said, Nancy Reagan, just saying no?
Yeah.
That's a different message.
That's a, it's cliche to say, just say no. because we've all suffered from peer pressure. We've all, I don't know anybody who didn't make a bad choice at some point in their lives. And, it doesn't really stop when you're a kid, but I think when you say, I am a game changer, that is about being something and doing something. It's active. Saying no is not active. Sometimes no is a soft no, right? No,
Yeah.
but I am a game changer. That's a statement of affirmation, and oh, by the way, all the people who I've seen in the videos have lent themselves to being a part of the larger solution here in West Virginia. And so I'm really pleased to see that.
I love that outlook. If you could give one message to the students and the youth and families in West Virginia, what would it be?
It would to look beyond today, look beyond next week, really think about 5-10 years from now, and how do you see yourself? And then what's the road? What's the path that's going to lead you there? One of the things I found in life, that if you share your dreams, hopes, goals, and aspirations with adults, oftentimes they'll help you to realize those things. So don't keep it secret. Let your flower bloom and blossom, and then you'll grow where you planted it.
That's beautiful. General Price, it was an absolute honor and a privilege. You have such an absolutely distinguished career in so many different facets of life, but to hear you talk so passionately about GameChanger and what the work you do with CADCA, but to bring that back here to West Virginia, trust me, it does not go unnoticed, and people are going to be on notice after watching this. It was absolutely beautiful. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, man.
And everything that you do means a lot. So you heard it here. GP just blew the house off of anything I could say. So don't listen to me. Listen to General Price and what this means. So before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you again to General Price for joining us. At GameChanger, we believe prevention starts with leadership, connection, and empowering young people to make healthy choices before addiction ever begins. If today's episode was something that you felt, and I don't know how you couldn't, don't let it stop there. You can support GameChanger's mission by learning more, sharing the message, volunteering, or donating to help us reach more students. To get involved, visit GameChangerUSA.org to learn more, but together we can help stop addiction before it starts. Thank you so much for being part of another episode of The Game Plan, and look out for our next one. Thank you.